I want to acknowledge our university and community sponsors, the University of Iowa's international programs and the University of Iowa's honors program. They contribute vital time, talent, and logistics to our organization. I also want to thank the Stanley U of I Foundation Support Organization for their financial support. And I thank today's special financial sponsors, Hayek, Moreland, Smith & Burgess, LLP, and Midwest One Bank. Now it is my pleasure to introduce H.S. Udaykumar and Jerry Anthony. H.S. Udaykumar received his Bachelor of Technology from the India Institute of Technology in Chennai, India, and subsequently pursued his master's and PhD from the University of Florida. He works with the Iowa Institute of Hydraulic Research in Hydroscience and Engineering and enjoys memberships in the American Society of Mechanical Engineers, the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics, and the Biomedical Engineering Society. He is passionate about implementing sustainable designs and shifting policies and energy choices in industrial settings. He initiated the India Solar Cook Stove project that has brought U of I students to rural areas of India to develop and implement more efficient designs for cooking. Jerry Anthony received his Bachelor's of Architecture degree from the University of Kerala, India, and his master's in town from the School of Planning and Architecture in New Delhi, and his PhD in Urban and Regional Planning from Florida State University. Jerry's major research and teaching interests focus around affordable housing policies, growth management and land, infrastructure, and housing markets. Jerry served as chair of Iowa City's Housing and Community Development Commission. It is indeed my pleasure to welcome Udaykumar and Jerry Anthony. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. How's the food? Good. We're going to talk about cooking, so I guess it's appropriate that you're having good food. So the average Boeing 757 carries about, let's say, 250 passengers, and there are many, many Boeings up in the air today, right now as we speak. Let's say about 40 of them crash, and everyone on board dies. Okay? Well, no, just imagine that for a moment. 10,000 people die today. Same thing happens tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after. For 365 days a year, about 4 million people die. Wouldn't there be a major uproar about this if it happened just one day? That's the topic we want to talk about. Women's health and the environment going up in smoke. According to the United Nations, every year, 4 million women die because of smoke inhalation from cooking on traditional wood-burning cook stoves. It's an issue that does not get much attention. It is a kind of slow violence that happens all over the world without getting any headlines. But it's killing so many people a day. And many of these women live in rural communities where they don't have access to many other resources. The only resource that they have, often the only resource that they have access to is firewood that they go and scavenge or chop down from forests near where they live. And these forests are receding very, very fast as the population is increasing. So it causes deforestation. And the effects of that deforestation are felt locally by those people and globally by you and I here halfway across the world from where this happens. Then as they burn this firewood, they inhale the smoke and have health effects, but a lot of the stuff goes into the atmosphere. According to the United Nations, about 20% of global carbon is produced from this traditional wood-burning cook stoves. So it's affecting us in very, very significant ways, but it's killing them in very, very significant ways. And that's the subject of our talk today.
So I'm an engineer, and Jerry is a policy person, and so we intersect on this problem that involves women. And Meena Khandelwal, who actually works with us on this project, and there are others as well, geographers and anthropologists. So we are trying to bring a multidisciplinary sort of viewpoint to try to solve this problem. And there are lots of people who are interested in solving this problem. United Nations, WHO, the Clinton Foundation, right? This is a big global issue, but it seems quite intractable, right? In India, there are lots and lots of programs that have been launched to try to make women go towards highly efficient cook stoves in place of their traditional hearths. There have been efforts to make them go towards solar cookers to stop them from cutting trees and also inhaling smoke. But all of these have been met with significant roadblocks. So there is actually no current paradigm for a successful program of this kind in India. There is some checkered success in Africa, for example, parts of Africa. And there are some checkered examples of this catching on in some parts of Latin America. But by and large, if you take local situations in South Asia or across some large parts of Africa, the problem persists. And it is something that we are struggling with. So we'll talk about the dimensions of the problem today. We'll show why it's complicated and what kind of policy structures and what can we do as people who are half a world away about the situation, if anything. So what's our responsibility in this, right? Because we are all going to face consequences because climate is changing. So now, of course, people come up with scattershot one-size-fits-all solutions. None of those apply because there are lots of complexities in this problem. Complex problems do not have simple solutions, unfortunately. Although currently we are in a governmental situation where people tend to think that you can do that, right? But we can easily disabuse people of that if you really look at the nuances. We all know that this is happening, okay? At least some of us who think do. And so that's data, incontrovertible. And you cannot stretch this into some half-formed truth or whatever. This is data from many parts of the world showing that global temperatures are rising, have risen dramatically, and this last few years have been increasingly the hottest years we've ever faced as humans. And so these are times when our temperature is rising, and of course this is caused by the accumulation of greenhouse gases. There is no doubt about any of this stuff. And our current levels of greenhouse gases have not been seen since going back 2 million years or 5 million years or however much back you want to go. So all of this is measured stuff. There's no hanky-panky here. We are at 408 parts per million CO2. It used to be 270 before the industrial era. There is much talk about clean coal, which doesn't exist. There is no such thing. It's like a unicorn. The only way to clean up the atmosphere that we know of is to trap carbon. And the only real way to trap carbon is in a tree. And it's not just grass. You can say the earth is green if you cut a forest and put grassland in there, or grow corn or whatever it is, the monocrop you want to grow. But there is no comparison between the carbon trapped by a tree and that trapped by grasses. They're just completely worlds apart. So we want forests because that's where our carbon is stored. There are only 3 places where carbon is stored in the Earth's system. It's stored either in the atmosphere or in the ocean or in trees. That's roughly 1/3 in the atmosphere, 1/3 in oceans, and 1/3 in trees. And so if you take away the trees, then that carbon dioxide has to go somewhere. It will either go into the atmosphere or be absorbed into the oceans. The oceans are already saturating and they're acidifying, because when carbon dissolves in that oceans, it acidifies. And so you kill off the entire ocean's ecosystem because acidification has impact on shell-forming creatures in the ocean, and that the lower end of the food chain, and so it goes all the way up. So this is science. And we haven't, as human beings, done a very good job with preserving our forests. Half of the forests in the world that used to exist have disappeared, and half of them have disappeared in the last 50 years. And there is an accelerating pace of forests diminishing all over the world. And there are different reasons for this. The main reason, most of the forests in the world disappear because of production of animal products. About 67% of forests are taken down to make beef. And so, when we talk about lifestyle change for people halfway around the world, we should also consider that for us, because we are the ones who are making those 67% of forests disappear. So we're going to talk about India a little bit. So we go to India with students, which is one of the best things we do. I'm so glad to see lots of young faces here. I can say young faces. I just turned 50. So, and some of them I know, and they're wonderful, wonderful students. I'm so glad the young people are here, because they are the future.
And some that have gone with India, to India with us.
India with us, yes, Azhar and Fidel. So it's great to have them here. And you can see them in this picture here in India. This is our last trip as a research group. So we work in this area of India called Rajasthan. And the place where we work here is, right where the forests, let me click on that. So in that area where there is a hill range, it's called the Aravalli Hill Range, and there are forests that pretty much used to exist on that hill range, and those have been deteriorating. Just to give you a picture of what that deterioration looks like. So that's the green part of the forest. And when the forests go away, that's the picture, right? So when we mean forests go away, we mean they pretty much essentially become extinct. It's also a cycle for the forests. Once you start cutting down forests, and this is happening in the Amazon, where they go and take pockets of the forest out. When you take pockets of the forest out, there are convective currents of air that come in, and there's more sunlight in that area, and the area tends to dry out from there. And as you create more and more pockets, there are cross circulations of winds that go through, and eventually a pockmarked forest becomes a denuded forest. And drying happens, and also because drying happens, you have more incidents of forest fires. And the forest fires increasingly take out, this is a forest instability, right? And this instability of the forest is coupled actually with the climate instability, because as the forests dry and they burn, they throw CO2 up into the atmosphere, there's greater heating. And because of the greater heating, there is an increased level of forest burning, which then couples with the atmospheric dynamics. And this is an instability. And these kind of instabilities scientists study endlessly, and we know a lot about these. And there are lots of these climate instabilities. The ocean couples in a similar way, and ice masses couple in a similar way. And we know this year, the ice masses, for example, in the Arctic, sea ices have reached their lowest levels. Winter ice, we're not talking about summer ice, has reached its lowest level. So this is an ongoing instability that we can view in slow motion. Because once the ice disappears, the water gets darker, which absorbs more radiation and warms the earth even more, which gets rid of more ice. This is a natural process of instability. You can write very simple equations for it and predict exactly when it's going to go away. So our concern is, of course, to try to address this problem in Rajasthan, where one of the ways in which the forest degrades, not necessarily gets deforested. Deforestation is sort of an overarching effect that is superposed on degradation. By deforestation, we mean things like timber extraction, mining, those kinds of activities, or the rich, right? Degradation is an activity of the poor people, the people who make $1 a day, and just living subsistence hanging by a thread, right? And these are these people, and these are the people who go and extract firewood from the forest, from the edges of the forest. And so these are ladies who have just come back from their wood gathering for the day, and they do this on almost a daily basis, 70 pounds per household. I've tried to pick up these huge bundles, and I cannot budge them. Neither can
And
Jerry.
so have I.
Yeah,
So-
and
we could have
Jerry is
left
much
it.
stronger, as you observe, empirical observation than I am. So, it's no mean claim that we cannot even budget. And these women actually carry this for several hours over hills. And I've followed them doing this, and it's amazing. Okay. And then they bring it back home and they cook with this, and you can see the soot everywhere. This is standard procedure for cooking. It's the most primitive stove, it's called a 3-stone. This one is a particular version called a horseshoe or a 3-stone hearth. It's nothing but a very basic, primitive, rudimentary, intuitive arrangement for putting a pot on a fire, right? Just set 3 stones and then you put the wood underneath. And then they cook for 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the evening. So this is sort of their pattern of cooking every day. So as an engineer, when I encountered this the first time I went there, I had this bright idea that we could actually get rid of this wood consumption for cooking and also solve the problem of smoke inhalation and soot production by, for example, designing a solar cooker, because that particular area of India is right in the tropical belt of mass, solar irradiation. And so if we could give them solar cookers, problem solved, right? We can walk off nice and happy. And there's abundant solar energy falling on the earth there. And I can actually, do back of the envelope calculations, and turns out that there's enough energy for them to cook those 2 meals, no problem. And in fact, there were solar cookers deployed in the village. Here, show a picture of a lady cooking with the stove. When there were 4 of these provided to the villagers. And a year later, a survey was done as to how they adapted to this. And when people went back there a year later, they found that they were all mothballed. Kids were jumping on top of these and treating them like seesaws, which they can double as. And then we went in there and asked, "What's your problem? I mean, we gave you this beautiful, clean device, spent a lot of money and time. Why aren't you guys using it?" So this is very standard procedure when you intervene in a community. You go in there thinking you're doing them a favor. Then they asked us, "Come on, I mean, we cook in the early morning and in the evening, and you give us something, you have to stand out there in the midday sun. It's hot, people are getting burned, our saris are catching on fire. We wear saris, you know that, right?" And sure enough, there's radiation all over the place, and you can easily burn yourself with this thing. And they said, "Well, look, we cook indoors, we don't cook outdoors. I have to take care of my kids and I have to sit on the ground when I cook. Why are you designing something that I'm cooking outdoors in the midday sun in the 120 degrees outdoor temperature and standing up while I'm cooking? This doesn't make any sense." So since then our attempt has actually been to design a solar cooker that you can use inside, which means that you have to store the energy in some way. Now, storage is a huge problem. It adds a lot to the cost of the device, right? And so we've actually designed something that was like $250, but these are $1 a day people. That's almost their annual income, okay? And so would you spend $40,000 if your average annual income of the United States, family, on a stove? No, you wouldn't. So this is sort of the calculus, right? We have to design something really, really cheap, which is a very difficult thing to do. So we've had misadventures. I had my students in the mechanical engineering design project design one of these things, and this is what they came up with. That thing is about 15 feet tall. Okay, and it literally was a gorilla. It weighed 800 pounds, right? And so, you are now confined in a design space. If you look at, designing things, you're confined in a design space that is really, really, really tiny with so many different design constraints. And that's a huge challenge to design something like this. So this is sort of from an engineering perspective, that is one of the huge problems, right? You want to talk about this?
Yeah, so let me talk a little bit about the policy side of this stuff. So often when we from the West or people from urban areas in these developing countries, they come upon this problem. They look at women cooking with cook stoves. They see the environmental damage. They see how it's damaging their own health, how it's impacting the environment. And they say, well, we know what the problem is. And then we go to those villages. From the West, we swoop in onto those villages and we tell those women, you have a problem. And the problem is this. Those cook stoves are killing you. And using of the cook stoves is spoiling the environment and is deforesting the forest. There are huge global implications. And here is the solution, whatever that solution is. Okay? And that has characterized intervention in this area and many other areas in developing countries for decades and decades and decades. In some senses, a certain sense of intellectual arrogance that we go in, we parachute into that place and say, here's your problem and here's the solution, and please make us saints because we've solved your problem. Right? And so,
Saint Anthony.
Saint Anthony or Saint Uday has arrived. But we never really asked them, is this really a problem for you? How much would you like this problem to be solved? Is this the biggest problem for you? Now, many of the interventions that have been characterized over the years by this intellectual arrogance and USAID, the Ford Foundation, the World Bank, the governments of India, China, many other countries have intervened in this area because they recognize that this is a big problem. Even though it's not getting media attention, this has been attacked from a policy perspective for at least 60 years. And if you go back, look at historical records for maybe about 130 years, governments, in fact, in India, the colonial power, Britain, pre-independence, was trying to address this problem. So this is a major problem that people have been trying to address. And why is it such a major problem? The deaths, 4 million women dying every year. That number is equivalent to the total number of deaths every year from malaria, from HIV, and tuberculosis put together. All of those get a lot of media attention, but this doesn't. But governments recognize that this is a big problem. So even before Gates got into malaria, Gates Foundation got into malaria, governments have been doing this for many, many years. Now in the cook stove issue, why haven't the cook stoves? Why have these villagers in Rajasthan or in Kenya or China not necessarily adopted these cook stoves that they have been given with? First, there's been a technological problem. So they were given cook stoves that promised them the sun and the moon and the stars, and everything would be fine. Firewood consumption would be very low. There'll be no smoke and all of that. And in reality, when they were using it, it didn't pan out. They had lots of technological problems, and they created maybe less smoke, but only marginally less smoke. Could be measured by instruments, but not by the average user of that, the improved cook stove. Second, many of these cook stoves were not sturdy, the improved cook stoves. So they gave them these cook stoves, and they had parts that were not very durable, and then 3 months later, 6 months later, the part broke down. The woman can't fix it herself. Her husband doesn't know how to fix it herself. It's an easy fix, but they have to take it somewhere to get it fixed. And then they have this old cook stove. They go back to their old cook stove, the unimproved cook stove, and they work with that. Third, sometimes these cook stoves that are given to them are priced at points that are just not affordable. So not so much as a solar cooker, but suppose you give them a $60 or a $70 new cook stove. They are living on $1 a day. $60 or $70, it fails, they'll go back to their old cook stove. And then the other point why these policies have failed is the socio-cultural dimension of this. As you saw in this particular solar cooker experiment, they gave them the solar cooker with all good intentions, lots of investment, but they didn't look at how these people cook and what they cook and when they cook and how they cook, right? And so even if you give them the best, the most affordable, the most robust cook stove, let's say it's $1, if it does not match with their existing culture, especially culture around food, is very, very difficult to change. So it becomes very, very difficult to sort of get them to use improved cook stoves. And these rudimentary hearts have been used in this area for only about 7,000 years or so. And here we are trying to change it in 1 year or 2 years. It's a difficult challenge. And hence, our team here is a broad team. We're trying to get at this problem from different dimensions. We have a conference going on right now, and you should come for the conference. It's open to everyone. And we have experts from different fields speaking on this issue. So let's get back to the...
So just to give you a glimpse of what Jerry was talking about, which is their sociocultural issues that get into making change, right? I mean, if you think about making change in the United States, for example, in our driving or in our transportation system, right? That's a sociocultural change, correct? The United States it's twofold: sociocultural and infrastructural. The United States has built an infrastructure that is road based. We don't have high-speed trains. Europe has it. We don't have a biking tradition. We have a driving tradition. When a child grows up and becomes a teenager, the rite of passage is your driver's license, right? I mean, what else is there? I mean, there's other societies have, Sweet 16, this and that, and other. We have driver's license test, right? So we have ingrained ourselves into a culture, and it's very hard to change. Although I'm very glad that my 14-year-old, I said, "Do you want to get your driver's license?" And she goes, "No, Dad, I will not drive." And I was like, "Wow, that's awesome." But anyway, I'm a bad parent, So what it has to kind of fit into their lifestyle, but when we see, but it's a very tempting thing to say, their lifestyle is so hard, especially for women, that this device, if they could adopt it, would make their lifestyle better, right? But then that's a questionable thing. Let me walk you through a woman's day, and you will see the degree of difficulty and the amount of time a woman would spend in gathering wood. And there's also the gathering of water. That's a whole other situation. But just in the wood, and then you would think, oh my God, this is so hard. Why don't we change it? So let's just walk through. So this is so the woman has woken up and she's made her morning breakfast, right? From 7 to 9 a.m. And then 10 a.m. she takes care of a bunch of stuff. Busy. Kids, goats, everything fed, watered. And then she sets off. So this is setting off in the morning at 10 a.m. This is the activity going across. So 11:30 is when they reach the spot. A few hills. When we followed them, it was a hike. It was a bona fide hike that we do for entertainment, right? This is the daily thing. Then they go chop wood. Extremely strenuous. Then the wood is packed up and carried. And now you will see the sort of intensity of this activity here over this hills. Over several hills, and then still walking. These areas that you see in the background and so on are areas which used to be full of trees, and they're all gone now, right? And they have to trek across this wasteland and finally back home at 3 p.m. So 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. This is when they get back home. And they're carrying that load that Jerry and I could not even budge. And then they come back home. It's the usual routine. Mom, I'm hungry. And then there's evening cooking. Correct? So that's 5 to 7 p.m. So their day has gone from 5 a.m. to now 7 p.m., revolving entirely around securing energy for the family and cooking their meal, right? And this is day in and day out. It's 365 days a year, no holidays. And the same meal, essentially the same meal every single day, 2 meals a day, right? It's the breads, and we've seen on occasion some dal, for example, with it. On occasion we've seen them eating this with ground up chilies, and that's the only thing. But this is, there's two of these bread pitas per family, person in the family. Kids have one maybe. Grown-ups 2, and that's it. That's the diet, right? So we are like, this is a problem, correct? It's a problem we tell them at least that it's a problem. If we ask the women, which we did eventually, got around to doing that when we
went this time.
no, we've done it it's not that bad. I'm not. So we've done it a couple of times and asked them, what are your problems in life? And this never comes up, the fact that they have to collect wood. Okay, we view it as a problem. We also view this as a problem because they're burning this wood and throwing up smoke. We ask them if that is a problem. Well, they occasionally will complain that it hurts their eyes and so on, but they actually don't view that as a serious problem, right? Number one problem.
Cell phones, clean drinking water.
Right. So their desires, if you ask them a question.
Yeah, so we basically said, if we were to give you 1,000 rupees, which is a local currency, which is the equivalent of about 3 days' wages at minimum wages, what would you do with that to improve the quality of your life? And lots of people had cell phones, but if they didn't have cell phones was the number one. But among people who had cell phones, the number one was clean drinking water. And some of those families had to be prompted to bring up the cook stove issue. So we were doing this cook stove intervention, and we wanted all of them to say, improved cook stove. And none of them said improved cook stove. So that was a big moment of truth for us.
Not even close. So solving the problem. Now, of course, solving the problem can take on many, many dimensions. On what scale do we want to solve the problem? So there are NGOs, for example, that have been working with the villagers to address the deforestation problem. And so what they do is they hire villagers and they make them actually plant these groves of trees, trying to bring back the forest. And here's a sort of picture of a part of the area that was completely denuded, right? So when they did this, after this program, that's what it looked like. So these are small plots of land. There's a 50-acre plot that they secured and then said, let's replant this and see what happens. And the villagers love it. I mean, it's awesome to have this as your backyard rather than that. Who wouldn't want it, right? But of course, then they have to live their lives. The other things are technology fixes. This is our view of how to fix a problem, which is I will hand you a technology, use it, right? And you be happy. Okay, so there's a whole museum actually. There's a university next door to this place, which has a whole museum of what are called improved cook stoves. People have come by, given this, disappeared, and a couple of years later they just take it to the museum and put it there. So you can see a whole range, right? People from all over the world, Sweden, Sweden does a lot of work on this. God knows why. The home of IKEA, Deforestation Central. Okay, but they want to fix that problem with deforestation over there because of women cutting wood, while they're trucking stuff out all over the place and shipping it to, big box stores.
And now to India too.
To India too, exactly. So IKEA is in India. We're so glad. So the technology fix is a natural impulse, right? Because that's the way we approach all the problem. For example, but the question is, why do we want to fix this problem? Really, do we actually care about these women? Why do we are afraid of the carbon impact, right? We are afraid of the carbon impact, particularly black carbon or soot, okay? Now, if you really think about it, the emissions of this woman out there is 1/64th of the emission of an average American. An average American emits 4 times as much greenhouse gases as the average person anywhere else in the world. We are 4 times as much, right? You take Europe, Western Europe, we are about 5 times as much. You take China, we are 3 times as much because China has now exceeded Western Europe, right? And you take India, we're 10 times as much average, right? We're 64 times emissions as this particular woman. So why are we blaming her for emitting? Right? And we go and tell her, you have a problem, you're emitting, you're deforesting. Deforestation, the largest consumer of wood in the world is the United States. Right? And that wood doesn't just grow in forests that are regenerated. Correct? They're growing all over the world. And what is the primary cause of deforestation? Growing animal foods. That's consumed in the West. So why do we go and tell these people that you have a problem, you need to fix it, and I know how to fix it, and I'll be really disappointed in you, and launch studies at universities in America and hold conferences if you don't fix this problem of your wood burning, right? So let's take all that in perspective when we talk about this. Okay. But the truth, and it's an intractable problem. People have tried to displace the chula with all of these technologies. And why is it so intractable? Because this is an intimate thing to the woman. Her hearth is where she is. Correct? She's connected to that thing. That's all she knows. That is her life. That is how she connects with her family. And so to displace that is really quite challenging in some ways. And sometimes we tend to think, oh, these women, they are so not interested in technology. This is not even true, because this particular house, you can see what's outside the house, right? It's a motorcycle. They have motorcycles. They have definitely have cell phones, multiple cell phones. The kids sitting there downloading MP3, right? Content on the cell phone. Some of them wanted, ahead of cook stoves, they wanted televisions.
Yes. And refrigerators.
They're proud owners of refrigerators, even though there's no electricity. Okay? Because it looks good. And you can always store something in there.
Yeah.
Right?
And it sets them apart socially, right? When only one house has a refrigerator. And they can go back to their chulha, the cook stove, and cook. So.
And so this is a scene where we went to a place that had the people were cooking on this 3-stone hearth. See, this is what they're cooking with, right? And then, of course, right aside on the side is this nice cell phone with a solar charging device.
Right here, the cell phone with a solar charging device, and that pot that we showed in this picture is right here.
So it's not that they're not tech savvy. It's not that they're non-receptive to technology. It's not that they're not innovative. It's not that they don't have a desire to improve their lives. Right? So none of those frameworks apply. Okay? But there are some things that are of great value. If you ask the women, isn't it terrible for you to go and collect wood? They kind of look at you like, yeah, I guess theoretically, right? So, just like if you ask one of me or him, isn't it terrible that you have to work so hard being a faculty member? Even though the state doesn't think we do anything, but it doesn't matter. And I would say, yeah, theoretically, but it's the most enjoyable thing I do. I live for this stuff. Right? So it's the same thing for these people, right? You ask them, isn't it terrible that you have to collect wood? But then there's a lot of meaning attached to wood. For example, this lady is taking the wood that she collected to the neighboring village to trade for buttermilk. So wood is food in some cases, right? This lady is taking it for pure cash, okay? The monetary interest. And you can see the road to the village. So these are tribals that are living near the forest, and the road to the village is traffic. Wood traffic, right? Being bartered to the people away from the forest for all sorts of goods and services. So in some ways, the fact that they can collect wood gives women autonomy. It gives them some financial and economic say in the family. It gives them a sense of self-worth. It gives them family bondedness, all kinds of things. It's value above and beyond what we think of it as carrying value. So all of that matters, and they have community interactions. When they go collect wood, mom and daughters get to gossip, right? And talk about mothers-in-law, usual topic. And sometimes the young sons don't interact with their moms at all because the moms are out all day. This is one opportunity for them to do it. And brothers and sisters interact. Girls start going at about 8 years of age. This little one that in the picture is 8, and she gets to hang out with brother, with grandma. So wood is a lot of other things that have value other than just being a fuel that generates carbon, right? And of course, in the context of India, you can always ask, are we solving the right problem? I mean, are the forests disappearing because of these women, right, cutting wood? And there are multiple stressors like in every case. For example, in India, the big chunk of biomass that is consumed by wandering mendicant cows, right, which are sacred. In India, the cows are sacred, right? We know now, if you look at the Indian political situation, people are getting killed because they are
Suspected of eating beef.
Suspected of producing and eating beef. Yeah. So this is a big problem. But there are 300 million cows wandering around in India eating everything in sight, correct? And no end to it because they live for 25 years. Correct. The alternative, of course, to that system is to confine the cows, which is what we do here, which has its own set of problems, because if you confine the cows, you have to grow crops to keep them alive, which means that that's where the corn is going. It's monocropping with fertilizer, blah, 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 soil deterioration, all of that system, that then the cows are stationary and they get diseases, so antibiotics are pumped into them, and that all the nitrates go into the water and goes into the ocean, kills off the Gulf, blah, blah, blah. So you see, all of these are dynamics that are interconnected because of our choices, right, and their choices. So how do we break through all of these intricate problems? So India is bovine density central. Shouldn't we solve that problem first? How do we solve that problem? It's a sacred cow. But remember, India is sacred. The cow is sacred, but India is one of the largest exporters of beef. How has that happened? Buffaloes are not sacred, right? The cousin of the cow is not sacred. And so you have to kill the buffaloes. Now, of course, buffaloes, when they're large, when they grow up to be adults, their meat is not good. So what kind of buffaloes are killed? The young buffaloes are killed. So babies are killed. Now, when we say that, we're like, what is this? This doesn't have any meaning. A cow is sacred, but a buffalo, its cousin, is not sacred. But then if you think about our own attitudes towards different species, you think about dogs, oh, I love dogs. Or cats, ooh, cats. But then, the pigs. Poor pigs, entirely sentient beings, exactly as affectionate and loving and all that stuff, right? And cows, again, same thing, doing nobody any harm, just farting and releasing methane, and they're gone, right? I mean, so we have these cultural, almost idiosyncratic dichotomies that make no sense, right? And the same thing here in India. And goats. If you are a poor farmer and you cannot raise large livestock, you raise goats. Because goats will eat anything, practically, right? They will eat roots, they will eat all sorts of crazy stuff. And where is this demand for goat coming from? It's coming from the Middle East, where there's a large demand for mutton. And so this gets exported. It's a huge export market, lots of money, right? Cash crop. So then you have this explosion in goat numbers in Rajasthan that also leads to the deterioration of forests. So there are all those problems. Now we're looking at this problem with this woman sitting in a poor home and burning some wood to cook her meals, and we're saying, you are the problem, I want to fix you. Well, there's large, probably much greater problem that is festering that we don't want to change because, city people's, urban people's, or privileged people's cultures have to be protected, while the cultures of destitute, kind of living by the day by day on a thread people can easily be displaced by interventions, right? So you're caught between those really challenging choices to make, okay? So, but I want to present maybe a little bit more of a confounding nuance to this. I think probably Becky and Anne and John have heard me talk about this, a few years ago. And I have to admit, at that point, I was squarely in the camp of, I need to fix this problem, right? But I've grown, as you noticed, and developed lots of gray hair. So this is wisdom, right? And it comes from asking the fundamental question, is cooking with firewood even a problem, right? These emissions, right? There are lots and lots of emissions. 3 billion people cooking, 166 million homes in India alone, about 80% of India is still cooking with firewood, right? 166 million homes is more homes than in the entire United States cooking with firewood on a daily basis. That's what it looks like. Lots of carbon, lots of soot up in the atmosphere. Every time you blink, one woman or child has died because of cook stove firewood inhalation. So 800 million kilogram of wood per day burnt in India alone. That's 100 million cars per year. Emissions of 100 million cars per year. Okay, that's half of United States car emissions of half of United States car. So a huge amount of emissions. You would have to plant 136 million acres of forest to sequester that carbon, the size of Texas, right? To sequester that carbon. So all that carbon is up in the air and in the ocean. But the fundamental question is, we know this is happening, we know the consequences, but we just ask the question, is open wood fire cooking actually the least efficient? Is cooking with wood bad? Right, this is what we're targeting. Actually, cooking with wood is the best way to cook. If you cook wood cleanly, it is the best way to cook. It has the potential of being zero carbon. Right? Because the carbon comes from the tree. The trees take up carbon from the air. You burn it, it goes back into the atmosphere, and it comes back down. Correct? So it actually has the best, potentially the best cooking outcomes. Right? Why is that the case? If you really think about it, when we cook with natural gas, we haven't taken into account the life cycle emissions from cooking with natural gas. That's definitely not zero carbon. In fact, since the United States has been fracking, our CO2 emissions are going down, right? Because we have natural gas, clean burning, correct? And to a large extent, this whole deal with coal, right? The fact that coal has dropped, coal miners, right, are losing their jobs, all this, angst and empathy that's emerging these days. Coal miners have lost their jobs because natural gas is cheap. Correct? Because we frack. If we weren't fracking, there would be coal. All right? And there are 80,000 coal miners right now in the United States. Correct? 250,000 solar workers. And solar is increasing exponentially. So 80,000 is a small number. Right? We can even say, okay, take the dividends from some fraction of it and pension the coal miners so they can live out their lives with comfort for the rest of their lives. They're not going to live long because most of them have black lung disease. Right? So many misplaced decisions, right, coming out of a misunderstanding of what's going on. And the question is burning wood actually bad? It's actually the best way to cook because it could be potentially zero carbon. Our assumption that when we cook, even with electricity, the electricity is coming from a coal burning power plant. Definitely not zero carbon. Our footprint due to our cooking activities is far higher than that of this lady sitting there cooking with wood. But we want to fix that problem. Right? So you have this whole neoliberal construct that is actually superposed on the world's poor, trying to make them change when we should be changing. Where is the self-examination? Correct? Where is the self-examination? So let's wrap up. I just said whatever I was going to show here in these graphs just in the last few minutes. But this is the picture, right? This is how we cook. All right, so we'll end there and maybe take some questions.
Yeah.
Villagers object to cooking over the noon period, but are willing to hike through a desert, bringing home the cooking wood. Can you please explain?
Well, the new improved cook stove requires them to make some changes. On the other hand, though, the hike for wood is a great social experience. And they like that social experience. And there is some resistance to change always, whatever that change is. And so the resistance is greater than the liking for the hike is very strong. So that's why they do it.
What are you doing to address carbon consumption in the U.S.? You've addressed that you've expressed that as a much more important problem.
Okay. He's giving me the difficult problem.
No, I can respond. Well, I think we have to make the change, right? Mahatma Gandhi said, be the change that you would like to see. We want carbon pollution to go down. We need to act. And there are very clear ways in which we can act. And one of those is, reduce our meat consumption. It's going to have a huge, huge impact. Reducing our meat consumption is going to have a huge impact. I mean, if we really care about the environment, that's the one simple thing that we can do in our diets. Now, some of the things that are a bit more challenging, for example, walking to work and all those things, reducing our car dependency is a good thing to do. But we don't have much choice in them right now because our cities are geared for auto dependency. We need to advocate for cities that are less car dependent, but that's in the future, 10 or 15 years from now, right? It's going to take a long time to make that change. But reducing our meat consumption is something that we can do here and now. And then we can always go into renewables and all of that, and we should do all of those things. And, for us working in this area, we've made some of those choices. Uday, is it okay if it's okay, I think. He's gone vegan. He's gone vegan after this experiment. And I grew up loving beef. I've given up meat 2 years now. He's been vegan for 5. I've given up meat for 2 years. And all kinds of meat. So these are changes that we have to make. Once we know this, this is the purpose of knowledge is not to know. The purpose of knowledge is to make us better people so that we can make the world better. So as we know about these things, we need to make changes ourselves so we can become better citizens of the universe. Yeah.
Let me add to that. I think that's great points. If you really think about things that are wrong with this country right now, this moment, there's an obesity crisis, there's an opioid use crisis, and there's a huge income disparity crisis, and the qualities of food that are available, for example, to disadvantaged communities are totally different from the quality of food that's available. In fact, in this country, disadvantaged communities are given food that is entirely bad for their health. And a lot of it is based on cheap meat that somebody wants to sell them, produced in factory farms. How can we get rid of all of these problems? I submit to you that the way we get rid of all of these problems is to stop consuming meat and to create a green economy. Because if you are in your car, just think about it. If you are in your car, you're driving, you're going to be isolated. If you're in public transportation, you're not going to be isolated. There are lots of social contracts that happen that do not emerge in a situation in which we isolate ourselves. Right? And people need social contact. That's how we live. And if we don't have that, we will kill our pain with something else, and the pharmaceutical companies and the meat production places will give it to you. So it's not a question of, and I will say this, and this is what I do, is I will speak about this every single opportunity I get, no matter what people think, in the heartland. So it's a no-brainer. Do the calculus. Just put it down on paper. Put down 10 different causes why you could cut down your meat consumption. 100 good reasons. The only reason why you would not, habit. That's it. Okay. People will say, oh, calcium. Oh, no calcium. No. Lots of studies that prove that osteoporosis, for example, is most prevalent in countries that consume a lot of milk. Protein, no protein. Sorry. Okay. So all of these are excuses that are handed to people by the animal production industry to make their life easier and to convince them you should continue to do what you're doing, because don't worry, if you fall sick, the pharmaceutical company will come and take care of it. Right? So just a matter of education and thinking about it. Even if you don't want to think with your heart, if you want to think with your heart, just watch a 5-minute clip that's called Why Milk is Sick and what happens to cows to make them produce milk. If you want to think with your heart. But if you just want to think with your brain, do it, fine. Okay? Lots of scientific evidence. Lots of empirical evidence. I'm not dead. I've been vegan for 7 years. Okay? I feel much healthier. Okay? This time I've turned 50. I can still beat 25-year-olds at tennis. So we can either stew in our own myths, or we can create a new reality.
And those of you interested in knowing more about the impacts of the meat industry, there is an award-winning documentary that is being screened at the IMU Theater this evening at 7:30, free admission. The title is What the Health?
Great.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Very quickly, just one last question. When and where is the conference? Because I think some of us might be interested.
So this conference is called the Provost Global Forum, and the title of the conference is exactly the same, Women's Health and the Environment Going Up in Smoke. Most of our meetings have been, it started yesterday morning. Most of the meetings were in the old Capitol Senate chamber, but the meeting this afternoon is in the Papa John building, W151, and the meetings tomorrow are in Becker Communication Studies building, room 101, a theater room. Those of you who are interested in environmental issues, I would strongly encourage you to come for this afternoon's keynote. The speaker is Professor Kirk Smith. Many of you who followed the environmental issues, you know about the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. They won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2007. It's a collection of scientists from different countries. Kirk Smith is one of the leaders of that panel, and he's going to talk at 2:15 this afternoon. So if you're available and free, come. It's free admission, open to the public.
Great, good. Well, we now have to unfortunately conclude our program, but I want to give a big thank you to Udaykumar and Jerry Anthony for their presentation. I also want to thank our sponsors, the University of Iowa's International Programs, the University of Iowa's Honors Program, the Stanley U of I Foundation Support Organization for their generous support. And we also thank today's special financial sponsors, Midwest One Bank and Hayek Moreland Smith & Burgess LLP. And we thank City Channel 4 for making our programs available to viewing audiences. So Uday and Jerry, as a small token of our appreciation, we present to you our highly coveted Iowa City Foreign Relations Council mugs, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
And we are adjourned.